Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Big East Rewind. I am your host, Chuck Everson from Villanova University, and my co-host, as always, my partner, my buddy, my pal, Sonny Sparrow, ladies and gentlemen. How are you, Sonny?
I'm great, Chuck. Looking forward to today's episode, as always. But
Yeah, it's a little different for us, Sonny. We do things. We've been bridging the gap between the old and the new, and this guy that we're going to be talking to today will do a great job of that for us because, the Big East has got a lot of history in its 45 years, and some of it was rocky, and I know I don't want to hit a sore spot with you, Sonny. I know you Syracuse Orangemen.
You're scratching that surface right now.
I was right there, but I didn't want to go for the kill shot. You're my buddy. I couldn't do that.
Thanks for holding out.
Yeah, it's nice of me, right? So anyway, yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about all of that, what happened, how that all went down, and we got a guy that knows all of it because he was there, Sonny, So we're going to go right into that without any further ado, Sonny. Today's guest is the executive director of bowl season. He oversees all the operations that goes into putting on the bowl games, the college bowl games, from soup to nuts, does everything. Now, you might be asking me, Sonny, why are we bringing in a guy who's in college football? Well, he has ties to the Big East. He's worked for the Big East for a long, long time. He's got a bunch of great stories. He was hired by Mike Tranghese, Sonny.
Yeah, he's got great connections.
Been around a little bit.
Yeah, great connections.
If you look, when you see him, you're not going to think he's been around that much, but he has been around a little bit, So, without any further ado, our guest today is Nick Carparelli. Nick, welcome to the show.
Chuck, Sonny, thanks so much for having me. I love listening to your show. I wanted to be a guest on your show. I don't know if that's always the case. I do a podcast myself, and sometimes it's hard to get guests.
Oh yeah.
And I know I'm a little different. You have so many Big East legends on your show. I am hardly that, but I have a lot of history and a lot of passion for the Big East back from when it started in 1979, and I was 11 years old living in Cheshire, Connecticut, and we might have been the first town in America to get ESPN on cable, and Big Monday came, and I was hooked all the way through the me working there, and then up till today. Really looking forward to talking to you guys and sharing some stories.
Yeah, so are we. And it's funny because I checked your bio and we went through a bunch of stuff together, and Sonny and I did, because we are professional journalists, Nick.
That's
I don't know if you know that. This is not we just turned the lights and the microphones on, and here we are.
And look beautiful,
We are coordinated today, though, by the way. That was not on purpose, by the way, just so you know. So I have to ask you right from the jump, because the one thing that jumped off at me, Sonny and I were talking about it pre-show. I might be looking for trouble asking you this right off the bat, but I'm going to go for this anyway. Sonny was like, I don't know. So you got to tell me about this friend that has a nickname that was after me, which I find that very hard to believe, Nick.
Yeah, that's a problem. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a
problem. All right, we're going to lead off with that. I was going to make that the final story, but let's start with a bang. So, well, you should be flattered, first of all, Chuck. Usually people are nicknamed after famous people, right? Or really well-known people. But, so my
depends on what it's for, though, Nick. That's
true. You're famous or you're infamous, right? So one of my closest friends to this day, his name is Dave Sulo, went to high school with me in Cheshire, Connecticut, was my high school teammate. Now we graduated high school in 86, same year you graduated college. So in high school, of course we were watching Big East games, and Dave wasn't as tall as you, but he was a big, rugged inside guy, similar style of play. He was about 6'6", and we're all together, the night before one of our games, and we're watching a Villanova game. And you get an offensive rebound, you lay it in, you do one of these kind of fist bump celebrations, and you
Arsenio Hall?
Yeah, kind of like that. And you do a beeline block to block, run lumber down the court. And all of us looked at each other, we're like, oh my God, that's Dave. That's exactly how Dave moves. That's how he acts. So we look at him, we're like, you're Chuck. And to this day, I promise you, none of us call him Dave.
That's
in fact,
hilarious.
Our spouses don't know that his name is Dave. They think it's Chuck.
That's funny.
And it actually had, it's one of those nicknames that had nicknames. So it was Chucky Baby, Charles.
Oh
and
yeah,
Charles.
I've heard them
Remember
all.
that show?
Yeah, yep.
A second
So
generation.
there's somebody out there that has a nickname that's stuck for 30 years because of you.
Well,
that's
I'll
a
take
compliment.
that. That's good. That's
a compliment.
You know what? I was nervous. I got to be honest with you, Nick. I was like, I don't know. Am I going to have to end the show 1 minute in? I wasn't sure what we were going to do.
That's why we led with it. I'm gonna tell
that's
you right
fantastic. I think that's great. So talk about, getting involved with the Big East, how you got involved. I know, you got involved on the football side. Talk about that for a second. First of all, about Mike hiring you and how you got, involved with the Big East.
Yeah. So, I started telling you about my history with the Big East. Started out as a fan like everybody, in the early 80s. I'm watching Big Monday. 10 years later, I graduated from undergrad. I went to a Division III school in Massachusetts, WPI. I played Division III basketball. Never played football, even though my career's been in football. And in 1992, Paul Pasqualoni, the football coach at Syracuse at the time, who was also from Cheshire and used to teach with my dad, asked me if I wanted to be a GA, work in recruiting, pay for my MBA, kind of an offer you couldn't turn down. So I took that job, and in 1992 was the first year of Big East football, ironically. So then you fast forward, 10 years, a couple of jobs later, Mike Tranghese calls me. I was working at the Patriots at the time. We just won the first Super Bowl in 2001. He says, Nick, I'm hiring this position as a associate commissioner for football. I'm going to be the coordinator of the BCS the next 2 years, so I need help with that. I want to interview you. So push come to shove, I get hired for that role. And that was like a dream for me. Like, I grew up a Big East fan, even though I was being hired on the football side to work for the Big East was a big deal. And then 12 years later, I was at the Big East for 12 years. Big East football ended. So I was at Syracuse at the beginning of Big East football. I was at the Big East at the end of Big East football. My role at the Big East evolved. I was running football, doing the scheduling, negotiating our bowl deals, et cetera. But on the basketball side, I worked really closely with Danny Gavitt and Tom O'Jackson and obviously Mike. I ran all the corporate partnerships at the Garden around the Big East tournament. It's amazing how much revenue we generated on 5 days at the Garden. So I've been to 12 Big East tournaments as an employee. 10, I've been to everyone since. I've been to others in the past, but 22 in a row. Next year will be 23. I was even at the COVID year. I went to Wednesday night. We shut it down Thursday. The next year was friends and family, and I got a pass. So I got a streak going there.
You know what strikes me as funny, just from listening to you? Danny Gavitt is now Mr. March Madness, and you're Mr. Bowl game. I mean,
we talk about
how
that.
did that happen? You have to talk about that a lot. That's crazy. I mean,
that's
think
a
about
power,
that, right?
That's a power grouping.
Yeah, man.
Well, I tell you, starting with Dave Gavitt and then Mike Tranghese, they were such unbelievable leaders. People ask what happened when the Big East fell apart. It was the fact that those two guys weren't running it. I mean, it was amazing their ability to build consensus and keep a group of schools together that, once we added, West Virginia and Louisville and Cincinnati, it was a very different type of schools. West Virginia and Georgetown don't have a lot of similarities as an academic institution, but they kept it together. Mike had no ego. He would hire the best talent he could hire. He would let them do their job. I learned a lot from him. So, Danny came and he was already great. I think I got a lot better under Mike because I learned a lot from him.
I got to ask you this, because you were at the genesis of Big East football, and the way it sounds in the Requiem for the Big East and some of the things that you can see and pick up on information wise, it seems like football was, okay, we have to do this. It's not our passion. Let's give it a go. What was it like? What did it look like when you started? Did it look like and feel like this is we're kind of winging this? What was your take and what was your observations on what it looked like?
Well, first of all, that Requiem for the Big East, every time I'm flipping through the channels and I come across it, I watch it again.
Yeah, can't stop.
I get emotional every
yeah.
time.
Yep.
Sonny, our orange should be for basketball should be in the Big East. I mean, UConn comes back and wins 2 national championships. I think our basketball program will be better served in that conference. But we know all the dynamics involved. But to your question, when the Big East football started in '92, I was a young GA at Syracuse. I wasn't at the Big East yet. I learned in later years, the dynamics of that. The story's been well told about Penn State getting an invite, or it was being contemplated to give them an invite. And the deciding vote was the athletic director and the president at St. John's saying, no, we don't want them. Right. I think the course of history would have changed if they joined, and we would have been able to have a strong football side and a strong basketball side. But after that didn't happen, it was piecing it together. Dave and then Mike knew that, Syracuse and Pittsburgh and Boston College at the time needed a home for football. So it was hard. There was a lot of moving parts. And, I when I watch Requiem for the Big East, I say to myself, this shouldn't be a sad story about how the old Big East fell apart. It should be a great story about how it stayed together for 30 years and really, really thrived. I think in the end, we were our own worst enemy because we were too good for our own good, and people got jealous of us. It's well known that when we got 11 teams in the NCAA tournament, which will never be done again, and that was the Kemba Walker year, and then UConn wins the national championship as our 9 seed in the tournament. Mike Krzyzewski was a little annoyed that the ACC only got 4 or 5. Why is the Big East getting so many in? And part of that was because of the camaraderie of the league, the genius of Dave and then Mike to position ourselves in the right way. But honestly, I just think we were better, and the only way they can combat it was to take our teams.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about the breakup and Pitt and Syracuse, it's I'm sure for you, having worked over at Syracuse, and for Sonny definitely, and everybody that we've had on from Syracuse, it still bothers them today. Why did those teams? Why were they so attractive to the ACC?
Well, realignment has gone in an entirely different direction nowadays, right? You have coast to coast conferences. I mean, Stanford and Cal's in the ACC, but back then, 10, 15 years ago, geography was still relatively important. Adding, there was strength in numbers. There were TV contracts. It seems like no coincidence. Realignment is triggered every time a major conference has a TV renegotiation, right? So these commissioners are pressured to deliver more dollars. Well, how do you deliver more dollars if they're not actually there? Well, you expand the conference and you make it bigger and you have more inventory of games. So I think for all those reasons, those schools were important. From the football side, Miami was really important because that was in the early 2000s when Miami was winning national championships. And ironically, they have not been to the ACC championship game once since then. And then obviously they needed, partners, so a big market like Miami, good football program, big market like Boston College. Initially, if you remember, Syracuse was going to be the 3rd team until the Virginia governor got involved and said, no, we're not leaving Virginia Tech out of this mix. So it ended up being Virginia Tech, and Syracuse stayed with us for a longer period of time. But crazy times.
Well, the reverse is true. When I think I was a sophomore, when they announced Pitt was coming into the Big East basketball conference, we were all relieved because there was talk about Pittsburgh, Penn State, and Syracuse forming a new football league, or the makings of a new football division. And we were nervous. We liked the Big East. It was great. And like you mentioned it. Can you imagine if the Big East started with Stanford and SMU and Cal, and you won't get Stanford people at Syracuse watching Syracuse games, but you will get St. John's people, you will get Villanova people, you will get UConn folks, and you'll get vice versa because people can drive to these places. You're just going to create this mania around the games. And I think it was genius. And I'm glad that core is back together for the most part.
Yeah. No, it was, most people think Pittsburgh was one of the original members, right? But they came in year 2 or 3. And football was always the problem for Dave. That was the problem he had to figure out. Penn State was the solution, and it got botched. It's, not Dave's fault, but it was the few things he wasn't able to execute. And like I said, if Penn State came in, there would have been a few others that followed, and you could have had 7 that played football, 7 or 8 that played football, and 8 that just played basketball, but all 16 played against each other. It would have been awesome.
Yeah, it would have.
And it would have been built to last. I think it would still be around to this day.
Well, you'd also still have some geography involved. So I think that helps. I really do. I mean, Big East is the Big East, right?
Yep, that's right.
So there was 2 big realignments, right, Nick? You had the first one Take us through that.
Right.
Yeah. So it's the first one when, the ACC took Miami, Virginia Tech, and Boston College. We reloaded. We added USF, Cincinnati, and Louisville. Louisville was really on the rise in the program. We, being a BCS football conference, we bolstered South Florida and Cincinnati. And then we also added DePaul and Marquette, to balance it out in terms of the number of teams and to appease the schools in the Big East that did not have football, right? They wanted kind of a balance of power. And in a lot of ways, by most metrics, we were just as successful, if not more so, than we were before. We didn't miss those schools. Boston College had some great years, but they weren't necessarily a stalwart in basketball. Miami certainly was not, and Virginia Tech certainly wasn't. And in football, like I said, Louisville stepped up, West Virginia stepped up. They were winning our conference, and history forgets that in the 16 years of the BCS, the Big East champion playing in BCS bowl games against the champions from the ACC, SEC, Big Ten, etc. We were 9-7 in BCS games, whereas the ACC was 3-13. So, the talk about who was a better football conference, did we belong, really didn't make a lot of sense. But how sometimes the momentum gets going in a certain direction, and perception doesn't mean reality.
I got to ask you, you grew up, you're a UConn fan. I don't know if people remember back, the early UConn days were not
it was lean,
right?
No.
They were lean is the correct word. What was it like? Because I remember, when we played UConn, we played Providence, or we played Seton Hall. I was like, okay, I got a pretty good chance to play.
Yeah, you and me both.
So what was that like?
Yeah.
Just explain that to folks.
Yeah, as a kid growing up in Connecticut, it was cool that UConn was a part of the Big East. I used to go to UConn games with my friends when I was in junior high school. It'd be more to see the visiting team than to see UConn. Don Perno was the coach. They would have their blue-white game at Southington High School, which was the town next to Cheshire, and it was a high school, and they had high school bleachers, and they weren't even full, and that was their blue-white game that we used to go to every year. And again, Dave Gavitt saw the vision. He knew UConn was a sleeping giant. They just needed the right coach, a little bit of infusion of money, better facilities. All those things happen, and the rest is history. I laugh at the discussions within the last year of who is a blue blood. Is UConn belong in the conversation? Well, of course they do. Like if they're not a blue blood, I don't know who is.
Yeah, I mean, how many national champions they got to win to get to become a blue blood?
Yeah. I mean,
and why
in 25 years.
Right.
Why do you think that is a discussion, Nick? I mean, I can never figure it out, because when we talk about it amongst, the guys, we got pretty close with Chris Smith. Chris is a buddy now, and we've talked to him about it. He can't even figure it out. So why do you think that is even a discussion?
Yeah, Chris played a big role in that transition to UConn from being an also-ran to the power they are now. I don't think he was before they won their first national championship, but he's a big part of building that. I'll tell you this, and this just might be my perception, my loyalties. We're all Northeast guys here. I think we have a little chip on our shoulder in the Northeast. We're always underestimated. Doesn't matter what we do. Basketball, football for sure. I think the rest of the country is jealous of us. I really do. I say that a little bit tongue in cheek.
No, I kind of like that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you know what?
Nazi, man.
We've had a lot of their guys on, and they're very they're very proud of the heritage there and the history there, especially Coach Calhoun. I mean, to hear him talk about his players is phenomenal, really. I mean, because he's got this rough, tough exterior, Nick. And I'll say this to you, Nick. I called him up to get him on the show, okay? And I said to him, I need your email address. And he said, sure.
No, wait. That's a simple request. We can agree on that.
It's a simple request. Yeah, Sonny. I mean, it's something we need to do. We do this on Zoom. It was, and I did not have a pen or a piece of paper with me. I had to grab one. He starts to saying it's C-A. I go, okay, hang on a second, Coach. He goes, you effing Villanova guys are all the effing same. You can't even get a piece of paper and a pen. You got to have, I asked him, I said, you want me to get on the line? I felt like I was talking to Coach Mass. I said, I said, should I get on? You're going to make me run suicides now? What do you know? what's going on? So
Chuck, you loved it though. Like guys like us, like I don't know. I'll speak for myself. I miss that old school mentality. I wish
yeah,
there were more coaches that would say, you know what, screw it. The world's crazy now. Everybody's soft. I'm gonna do it the old school style. Danny Hurley's doing
Like
that.
Danny. I was
right.
just gonna
Yeah,
say,
Danny.
just like
Yeah,
Danny.
He's
And
doing that,
Shaheed's
you
not
know, and
Shaheed's
and
not
it,
far
it
off.
still works, you know. But the key is, and you said it about Coach Calhoun, you know, the rough exterior. If you're tough on a college kid, but you have their best interests in mind, they know that, right? And I don't think I have two boys in college now. They're not adults. They're not. And my kids, they're great,
right.
but they're not ready to tackle the world. They need me up there behind a little bit still.
Yeah,
And sometimes the kid leaves the house and goes to college. You don't have that, you know, their dad on you all the time. Some kids didn't have a dad in the first place.
hmm
So the role that coach can take on, I think the more tough love, the better. And you hear all these great stories about the success of guys who played for really, really tough coaches.
yeah. Having both of us played for a really tough coach, two of the best yellers in the whole league, probably, right, Sonny?
Yep.
Between Coach B and Coach Mass. You
Now if
kidding?
we're let's grade facial expressions. Let's
Oh, you
go
can't.
facial
Well, I don't know.
expressions.
Coach was good. Massimino was good.
I was just gonna say, pretty good. Mass is
Yeah.
pretty good, but Coach Boeheim has some just classic. Everybody imitates, and I don't think they'll ever duplicate. Coach Boeheim's got the greatest looks. Did you get to know him when you were there with Coach Pasqualone? You had to.
I did. You know, the facilities were much smaller, much more confined, right? So we were kind of
Yeah,
down the
manly.
hall, and there was a little staff lounge, and he'd be playing pool by himself in the middle of the afternoon. So I'd go in and, you know, yeah, hey Nick, yeah, you want to play? You know, I'm like, sure. You know, Coach Bam asked you to play pool, you play pool. You know, and I actually, you know, my dad was my high school basketball coach. I played Division III basketball. My youngest son is a student manager at Providence for Kim English, and he's all in it. He wants to be a big time coach. I thought I was going to be a coach. That's what I wanted to do. My opportunity, you know, knowing Coach Pasqualone through my dad to get that job and get my MBA, I couldn't turn that down. So when that was over, I'd actually went to Coach Boeheim and said, Coach, I really want to be a coach. Can I be a GA for you? And Sonny, you'll probably appreciate this. He said, well, I got somebody else in mind for the ops role. And I said, well, Coach, if you can just interview me, I think I can, you know, sell you on the things I could do for you. And he's like, yeah, Nick, I don't interview people for jobs. He goes, like, all right, what do you interview him for? Guess you don't interview him at all. But no, it's even to this day when I was up at the, he still goes to football games. I was in the athletic director's box at the Stanford Syracuse game last Friday, and I had a nice conversation with him. He's great. I find him a lot more charming than the general public might think.
Yeah.
People that know him, they get it, you know. But for the most part, he's a big fish in a small pond, right? So he's always been very guarded on that exterior. I can't blame him.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. So I want to take you back to 2013 for this last split up.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, this is the part where you rip my heart out. That's it.
Well, you know what? I don't mean to do that, but I just want to.
Well, I'm glad you're here because I was gonna go after Nick specifically and put all the blame on him. I really was.
Right. Well,
listen, Nick is on here. Nick, you got to answer. You got to answer to some of my people here. How did you get us out of there, man? How did you do that to us?
Oh God, I fought to keep us in. You know, obviously
right.
when you know that realignment in 2005, we stayed for another 8 years. Ripped my heart out the day that Syracuse and Pitt announced they were leaving out of nowhere.
Right.
I was at USC doing my job. I was at the USC Syracuse non-conference football game, and then it was announced, and I'm out there expecting to see all my Syracuse friends, and I was like a ghost, you know, to them. I was like, this is very uncomfortable. And it was ironically the day that Dave Gavitt passed away. I'm sure you guys know that.
I did not. I did not. Did you?
And
yep.
And that way, it's unbelievable that's the case. In a lot of ways, I'm happy he never saw that day happen. But yeah, it was hard. I don't think we had a choice at that point. Things were starting to fall apart, and then in 2013, we were adding schools in Central Florida and whatnot. And I will tell you that the tipping point for the 8 basketball schools was when the new commissioner asked Tulane to join the league after they stomached East Carolina and they stomached a couple others, and I think the group of basketball schools said, "Dad, this is getting a little out of hand. There's too many schools on our schedule that we just don't want to play basketball against." So that's when they kind of pulled away and formed their own league, and it was disappointing, but it was the right thing for them. And I told you, I've 12 years working at the Big East, 10 years I've been to every Big East tournament, and you guys know. Although Sonny, I don't know if you still go, Chuck. I'm obviously you must. It has the same vibe, the same energy. Like I could do a whole dissertation on the value of a brand, right? The Big East brand was so strong that even when we had that requiem for the Big East and everybody thought we were dead, a year later, all the Wall Street guys, all the New York City hoop guys, you name it. Like, wait a minute, the Big East tournament's back? Who's in it? Well, Villanova's still here, and St. John's and Georgetown, and Providence is getting better. Now we got, these new schools, Butler, Creighton, so people still came. And I'm really happy for them. I have a lot of friends that are at the current Big East schools, and it's still awesome.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Sonny. Go ahead.
Wasn't there a point they were talking about maybe having a Catholic school alignment? Wasn't that part of the discussion or no? Was
this prior to the big breakup or?
Yeah,
not really. It was too hard. I mean, there's not enough Catholic schools that play major college football, right? So to have that division, I go back. If Penn State came on board, it would have attracted a lot of others, and we could have had half the conference played football, the other half did not. All of them played basketball together, and it would have been awesome. But it still doesn't take away from the unbelievable moments of the old Big East. I was those 12 years I was there. That tournament, that was my favorite week of the year. I needed to go on rehab, when I got home.
That's right.
But I mean,
there's the electricity of the Garden. And the teams, and now all the especially now the coaching personalities have really, you look at the coaches that are walking the sidelines. I mean, it's pretty unbelievable. I mean, almost across the board. And then add to that the players, and now the vibe of Madison Square Garden. There is nothing on the planet like it.
Yeah.
There's every conference realignment is a real thing. It's probably never going to end. Right, you got the Big Ten and the SEC at the top. Nobody wants to leave those conferences, but a lot of people want to get in. I'd say after that, the Ivy League is probably the most secure conference in terms of realignment. But I would say the Big East is right there. Nobody in the Big East wants to leave. Put UConn aside because it's a little different dynamic. None of the rest want to leave. A lot want to come in, but it's a very exclusive club.
Yeah, you know what? It helps when you're winning. I mean, they come back, their first, from 79, 80, when it started until 2013, we had a bunch of national champions. We had a bunch of teams in the Final Four. We had a bunch of teams that did a lot of things. Now, from 13 till now, you got 4 national championships. Villanova's got a couple, and so does UConn. The other teams have been successful. This year, it was a little bit different because, and Sonny and I have talked about this on air, St. John's and Seton Hall in particular, and I would even argue Providence. I think all 3 of them should have been in.
Yes, I agree.
But I mean, and the strength of schedule, they, the problem was with the league this year, it was so good that they were devouring each other, and you see it now if you look at the preseason schedules of some of these teams. Oh boy. It's not like they're playing the top 5 teams in the country this year. Some of these teams,
Yeah, it's it's because people don't like us, Chuck. I told you that before.
Yeah,
keeping us out of the tournament now. They're still upset that we got 11 in that one year.
I hear you.
So I got to ask you, when you were doing in the football, you said, and you told us that you used to get a call from Jay Wright every now and then to kind of get a feel for the football vibe. Why don't you share some insights into those conversations?
Yeah, we our conference was. I go to conference meetings now in my current role, and there's always a tension, right? The competitiveness does not stop on the field, and it's not fun. The Big East, we were a tight knit group, so our meetings in Ponte Vedra Beach every year, it was men's basketball coaches, women's basketball coaches. football coaches, ADs, conference office staff, and we hung out and we knew each other. So I knew all the basketball coaches, and being a basketball guy at heart, I love picking their brain. They invite me to practice and whatnot. So Jay and I, Jay's an easy guy to like, easy guy to get close to. I think everybody thinks they're close to him, whether they are or not, because he makes you feel that way. So, during that final realignment in 2013, he'd text me and say, Nick, you okay? Can I call you tonight? I'm like, Jay, you can call me anytime. So he's like, all right, I'm going to be in my car for 4 hours tonight, coming home from a home visit. I'll call you. If you're busy, just call me back. I said, no problem. So I'm sitting there doing homework with my son, Nicholas, who's 8, into my job, as you can imagine. My cell phone's sitting on the table. We're doing homework. It rings. It says Jay Wright. So I say, well, I'll call him back in a minute, because we were just doing a math problem. I don't know. He's like, Dad, you got to answer that. I'm like, I'll get it, buddy. So, finish the homework. I call him back, and Jay's great. We're going through all the things. I'm telling him stuff that I shouldn't be telling him about schools we're talking to and whatnot. My son's tapped me on the shoulders like, Dad, when you're done, I need to talk to him. I said, okay. So Jay's done. Jay being Jay, he said, Nick, thanks so much for taking my call. I know you're with your family. I'm like, Jay, anytime. Yeah, he said, well, since you bring it up, there is something you could do for me. My son's sitting right here. He wants to talk to you. Yeah, put him on. Jay, why are you playing this guy? He can't set a pick, blah, 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 blah. So I get the phone back. I'm like, Jay, I apologize. He goes, are you kidding me? He was spot on. I don't know why I'm playing him. He knows more about my team than I do. Jay being Jay, he's the best.
Well, that's how he is, 100%. What you see is what you get with that guy. He's the real deal. Yeah, he's the real deal all the time, is right. So let's get into some of your some basketball stories. I know you worked with Mike Tranghese and Dave Gavitt a little bit.
UConn games with Dave Gavitt. Talk about that.
Yeah, tell us some Tranghese and Gavitt stories.
Yeah, Dave was just an amazing guy. Like, everything you hear about him is true, in terms of how smart he was and how engaging he was, and his ability to build consensus. Some of the things he pulled off in the early years of the Big East that are legend. I don't know who could do it nowadays. But, when I was working at the Big East, he was kind of retired. He had a house on the Cape, but he had a house in Providence. And he'd pop in the office, and sometimes he'd come in, sit on my couch. Nick, what's going on with football? So I'd tell him. And there are a couple times he said, he was just looking for a companion for the trip. I was probably 10th on the list. I don't know, but he popped into my office. Hey, I'm driving to UConn to see the game. You want to come for the ride? I call my wife real quick. I'm like, honey, I gotta hang out with Coach Gavitt tonight. This is too good, So fascinating conversations. You hear the story. I heard them directly from him. The stories about him. In '88 when PJ Carlissimo was about to get fired. And he orchestrated the coaches voting him coach of the year. And then he calls the president of the school. You can't fire the coach of the year. How would that look? And then they go to the finals the next year. Who
exactly.
Yeah. And then you go back to the early years. Mike Tranghese tells this story all the time. Mike was Mike was the first and only employee at the time of the Big East when the Big East started. Yeah. Dave was still the AD at Providence, the part-time commissioner. And he named Mike the deputy, and Mike was the only full-time employee. And, the first couple Big East tournaments, if you remember, they were at Providence, they were Hartford, they were at Syracuse. And he wanted to go to the Garden. He said, we're not going to go till we're ready. And it was the year that Pearl committed to Syracuse. Chris Mullen was going to St. John's. And most importantly, Patrick was going to Georgetown. And Mike tells the story. Dave called him and said, Mike, it's time. We're going to the Garden. And they've been there ever since.
Yeah, and still going strong at the Garden. It's always packed, and even today, it's a phenomenal experience. If anybody who's listening has never been there, you got to go.
I think it's one of the true phenoms of sports. Like, for a 5-day event, the play-in games on a Wednesday, it's sold out. They sell every last ticket. And again, I'm very lucky in my role. I go to a lot of football games. I go to a lot of basketball games. I get a chance to, visit with some of the commissioners a little bit when I go to their events. So I've been to all the other tournaments. And quite frankly, most of them are pretty stale. If it's the wrong matchup, nobody's in there. They don't do most conferences don't do a good job of seeding the team's fan bases.
Right.
If you look at the ACC, they have an entire section for each school, right? So if that school is not playing, that whole section's empty, right? At the Big East, it was a lot of work, but we would have, if it was, Villanova's allotment for their alumni and their season ticket holders, it was 4 here, 4 here, 4 here, 4 here, 4 here, and it was spread out around the building. So it never looked like there were gaps. But then, the secondary ticket market is crazy for that anyway. So there's not gaps. But it's really just a phenomenon of a sporting event. I don't know of anything like it.
What was your role exactly on the basketball side, Nick? I mean, I know you were involved with the promotions and setting things up and stuff, right? What was your role?
Well, the basketball tournament is our biggest event of the year, right? Football, you don't have a tournament, so it
was
was
kind of all hands on deck for
all
that,
hands
right?
on deck. Yep. So we all had a role. Sometimes I'd be in the tunnel, kind of managing the team. Sometimes I was in charge of the corporate partnership program, so the building was littered with CEOs and CMOs and our title sponsor, and your the amount of steps I must have put in those 5 days, just walking around the building and saying hello and shaking hands. And then you have obviously all your institutional staffs and the presidents, and you wanted to visit with them. So it was a busy week, but that the old garden before I say old, the renovation hasn't been that long ago, but remember the iconic tunnel in the
tunnel,
middle,
where Willis came running out,
Yeah, that might be one of the coolest spots to stand in, in any sporting event ever. When game one of a doubleheader is being played, and let's say it's going down to the wire, or maybe it goes to overtime. Both teams are standing shoulder to shoulder, crammed in that tunnel, peeking their head out, looking up at the scoreboard, laughing with each other about the great plays that they're seeing and the great game that they're watching. And then the game ends, and then they look at each other and they're like, "Okay, let's go. Let's fight."
And it's on.
They play each other. The intensity in that tunnel was awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. And especially when you got a guy like Pearl playing, everybody's looking to see what he's doing, what Walter Berry's doing,
Well, yeah, because they all knew each other, right? They played each other twice a year back then. A lot of them played against each other in high school. They might be friends, right? They watch each other on TV during the year, but now they're watching them, through the tunnel, in this electric atmosphere as they're about to go out and play themselves against another team. And then whoever wins, they're probably playing tomorrow, unreal.
But there's only 2 arenas that I'm familiar with that when you walk through the entrance to the arena, there are ghosts, there are memories. And I'm a Knicks fan.
Yeah, you feel it. You feel the building.
You're like, Willis Reed was right here. This was where Clyde Frazier came out. This is where, the LA Lakers ran through here after they dropped a game. And then you go to the Boston Garden after dealing with the worst locker rooms on planet Earth. You are now walking onto the parquet floor and you have the same feeling, but it's not the same. The Garden is special. And I know I speak for a lot of people, but it was eerily,
everything about it. How about the elephant elevator? I know you guys have been.
Yeah, man. Yep.
My grandfather used to take me to the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus as a kid. That was one of the things we would do.
And to me, the voice of the Garden will always be John Condon. That was, because cable was just getting started, cable TV. So you get some of the games and you have to move the bunny ears around to get it, but you can always hear John Condon announce the game and stuff. And that was it for me to hear him say my name. I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool.
Like Shepard at Yankee Stadium. I mean, it's like,
And that week for us, as working for the Big East, like that was our building for a week. It's like you rent an apartment, right? You rent the Garden, it's yours. You come and go as you please. So Friday and Saturday, when there was only a night session, I would go in both days with my sons who were 6, 8, 10 years old, with my friends. Some of the guys I worked with and that played for the Patriots when I worked there used to come and I'd get them tickets. Pepper Johnson is a good friend. Troy Brown would come, Deion Branch, and we'd play a little pickup. And we're like, what are we doing? And then we watched some iconic event unfold later that night. I'm like, I hit that shot from that same spot.
Yeah, that's cool.
You mentioned the Patriots. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
sure.
Right, you were part of a Super Bowl Patriots team.
Yep. I was
just
very
talk
lucky.
a little bit about it if you don't mind, because that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I was 2001 season, so it was the Patriots' first Super Bowl. I had come from Notre Dame. Coach Belichick interviewed me at the Combine in Indianapolis. I drove from South Bend to
What was
Indianapolis
that
to
like?
interview.
What was that interview like?
It was stereotypical Bill Belichick. Everything I knew of him, his persona, it just came to life. He was wearing a hoodie and he was monotone and asking me questions and just very matter of fact. I didn't know if the interview went well or not.
You got an
But yeah,
impersonation? Can you do an impersonation of Bill Belichick?
he's Nick, a little bit of Boeheim in him, a little bit, just kind of that, just kind of apathetic tone of voice, resigned to the fact that somebody's going to screw something up and he's going to have to fix it, but that year was awesome. It was the 9/11 year. It was, it wasn't a no-brainer for me to leave Notre Dame as the recruiting coordinator, go to the Patriots, who, you guys remember Patriots.
Oh yeah.
Awful. Bill Parcells kind of had a little flash, but they were the Jaguars back then, is what they were. And Bill got fired from the Browns.
Yes, he did.
His first year at the Patriots, he was 5-11. So I got hired just before the second year. So it wasn't a no-brainer. But being a New England guy, and I took the job, and it was awesome. I have so many stories from that year, and I loved working for him. I know I did a good job, because if I didn't, we wouldn't be friends to this day. I've seen the way he treats people who don't do a good job, and they deserve that treatment. But he was one of the easier guys to work for, as tough as he was to work for, because there was no doubt what he wanted you to do. It was very clear. You do your job, which was his slogan. Yeah. And if everybody does their job, we're gonna win. And he placed an unbelievable value on everybody in the football program, from the quarterback all the way down to the kids who wash the towels in the locker room, right? Yep. If anybody didn't do their job and do their job well, that's when things break down. And he really gave everybody a sense of self-importance. Like, it's my job is important here.
Who, refresh my memory, who did they play in the Super Bowl that year? And my friends from Boston are going to shoot me, I know, but
yeah,
who did they play?
We played the Rams, who had won the Super Bowl the year before. Right. Kurt Warner was the quarterback. Marshall Faulk, greatest show on turf. Nobody could stop him. We were 14-point underdogs, and it was in New Orleans. New Orleans, that building's been very special to me. That Superdome, like, got my Super Bowl ring there. It's where Syracuse won the national championship. A lot of other events I've been to there over the years. A lot of good memories there.
So we were talking about the garden and the electricity of everything, right? So talk about, I know that you were in charge of getting, the celebrities and the dignitaries come in and get their seats and stuff like that. You were kind of in charge of making sure they were taken care of too, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I was in charge of them, but I ended up having to manage the situation.
Well, listen, that's like being in charge, Nick, because I know what that's like. I deal with a couple of divas on this show too. You know what I'm saying, Nick?
I can tell.
I can tell. Tough.
Well, it was all. I mean, that speaks to the energy around the Big East tournament. Like, I used to, my first couple of years, I told you I'd be doing laps around the building. You just kind of gloss over people because your mind's going a mile a minute. But then I realized that, I got to start focusing on faces. And you had tournaments that Pat Riley's there, Spike Lee was there all the time, Denzel Washington. Paul Tagliabue would always come, Michael Douglas. I was sitting there with Willie McGinnis one year, who I knew from when I worked for the Patriots. And honestly, Spike Lee was, courtside right in front of us, and Denzel was just front right, and Bill Clinton was sitting in front of it. He always sat in our section. He said, "This is the greatest event ever." And I'm like, I know, isn't it great? The excitement in the games. He goes, "No," he goes, "I am by far the lowest well-known person in this building. No one's bothering me. They're going to all these other people. I'm enjoying myself, relaxing." But Bill Clinton used to come all the time. My cousin, who's my dad's godson, John Baldacci, was a 2-term governor of Maine. He was a Democrat. He was really close to the Clintons. So I was able to have some nice conversations with President Clinton about that. And I guess he gave my cousin a driver. He asked me if he still had it. I said, I don't know. And, I had to introduce the president to my dad one year. My dad would come. And one year, I'm talking to the president, whatever. My dad's sitting in great seats the other time. And he was so upset at me that I didn't introduce him to Bill Clinton because he was such a big fan. I'm like, Dad, it just didn't lend itself to that. What am I going to parade him over to you? And, so the next year he was there and I'm with my dad and they're leaving with the Secret Service. I'm like, Dad, come with me. So we're in the tunnel on the outside and President Clinton couldn't have been nicer. He recognized me from sitting next to me. And I said, this is my dad. And they had a conversation. So my dad thanked me. I'm like, Dad, don't thank me. I'm just getting you off my back. Finally.
That's right. Yep. That's right. That's right.
You know, it's funny, Nick, when I went to the last couple of years, I went to the Garden, I had on a Syracuse shirt. And I can't tell you who stopped me and didn't they all say, you guys should be here? Every one of them. You know, and that if we were there, they'd want to kill us. You know what I mean? But it's still true.
Well, I don't know if you're aware of the idea that Chancellor Severud at Syracuse has about the 70-team football league. And I talked to him about it last weekend, and it's intriguing. College football is so different than every other sport, and you could have you could travel far because you're not doing it very often, right? But all these major decisions in college athletics and conference alignment and realignment is being made, based on football, and it's really to the detriment of every other sport, right? I don't think the Stanford softball team wants to come and play Syracuse, right? But they're going to have to, right? And vice versa. I'm hopeful that, it's going to take time. Nothing happens unless the Big Ten and the SEC want to and want to do it. And they're not going to need to break off football to be a part of the Super League. But if that ever happened, then we could have a little bit more of a sense of normalcy with all the other sports. And then maybe the old Big East can get back together because the ones who play football are a part of different group of teams, if you will. So it's a great idea. I just don't know if we're going to get any traction.
Chuck, we got to have Nick on like every week. I got to hear something like that every single a little snippet.
Yeah, I know.
My heart just picked up a couple beats. It's pretty cool.
Listen, it's not just you, Sonny. I mean,
a little bit of hope, man. I'll take hope any day.
I would love to have them back in the tournament. I mean, in the conference, it would be fantastic for everybody. So
just imagine if we could just get back Boston College, Pittsburgh, and Syracuse, right? Yeah. And have a 14-team league, and those three schools are able to play football and some other conglomerate and be healthy. That'd be awesome.
Not for anything, Nick. I mean, those teams go down into the ACC. They haven't really been the same since, especially in basketball. You look at BP. I mean, you look at BC and Pittsburgh. I mean, they just haven't had the success that they had when they were in the Big East. I don't think. I mean, Syracuse too to some degree. I mean, Syracuse was good and everything, but it just doesn't seem
when they were in the Big East.
Yeah, no. And I think it has to do with they're not getting the players that they were getting before, because as a parent, I don't want to travel all the way down to North Carolina to watch my kid play, and I live in the Syracuse or Rochester area or whatever. There's no way in the world I would want to do that, but I don't know.
There's not one school that I can think of that has left the Big East and is better off from a competitive success standpoint in their new league, in either basketball or football. Boston College, Pittsburgh, Louisville, Cincinnati, Syracuse, Miami, Virginia Tech. None of them.
None of them.
UConn came back. How about the conversation of UConn maybe going Big 12? That had to be like on the radar big time.
Yeah, well, it didn't surprise me. Like my friends that are still at the Big East, they asked me when they were talking about UConn coming back into the Big East and being independent football. It was pretty easy to predict that a day that kind of conversation might surface, right? If they had a chance to join the ACC, they would, right? Big 12 geography was a little bit out. So, I don't know unless things change dramatically if UConn's going to always be in the Big East, but I know the rest of the Big East teams, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they can leave. I mean, it's a better league with UConn in it.
No doubt. It's obviously worked out better for them. They're not winning 2 national championships in the last 2 years if they're not in the Big East.
I think we should say that 2 times. They are not winning 2 national championships unless they're in the Big East. I agree. 100%.
No way. No way. And 2 years ago,
the same thing.
2 years ago, they didn't. Their only losses were in conference. Yeah. And you go back, I bring up that Kemba year, that Kemba run. That what was so amazing about that year is we got 11 teams in the tournament. Connecticut was our 9th seed. So they played on Tuesday in the Big East tournament. They were 9-9 in the Big East. They were 20-9 overall. So they didn't lose a non-conference game. They lost 9 games in the conference. They win 5 games in our tournament, 6 games in the NCAA tournament. They finished 31-9, winning
amazing,
11 postseason games. No one will ever play postseason in 11 postseason games again, let alone win 11.
How about 5 games to win the league? How about that?
Yeah, and I think most of the guys on that team will tell you, and I think some of them have, that was tougher to pull off than winning the 6 in the NCAA tournament.
Well, because it's every night, Nick. That's
every
why,
night. No days off. You didn't have, whoever they played in the opening round of the NCAA tournament was probably inferior to that, maybe even second round. But yeah.
So tell the story about the dinner that you guys had the day of the Kemba Walker game.
Yeah. So we used our staff dinner. So Big East tournament week, we'd get down on Sunday and we'd live in New York for the week. Greatest week of the year, right? Games would start Tuesday. We had AD's meetings on Monday. So Monday night we'd go out as a staff, and Danny started this thing. We put in $1 in each, and we had to, you picked a number, right? 1 through 20, however many was on our staff, and whoever had 1 gets to pick first, and you pick a player that you think is going to score the most points in that Big East tournament. So I got like 4, and I knew I was going to pick Kemba Walker because they're playing on Tuesday. They're going to win. So right away, I know he's going to play 2 games. Right? So that's my strategy.
Right.
Maybe play 3. Some guys might only play 1. So I don't know who the first 3 clowns picked on our staff, but I Kemba Walker. And, not only did they play 5 games and win 5 games, but to this day, that's the record for most points scored by one player in one Big East.
There you go.
Yeah, that was always fun that night.
And the other story I want to hear, and listen, what happened when Tranghese retired? It was the night of that 6 overtime game, right? His retirement party,
that was 2009.
What they do? Start that at about 8 o'clock in the morning? Why? I mean, how did that work?
Well, Mike was a legend. A lot of his friends would come to the tournament every year. Colleagues, etc., garden staff. So his wife and Mike were part owner of a restaurant called La Masseria on 48th and Broadway. Rhode Island guy owned it. So we're going to have a retirement get together for him after the second game on that Thursday night. Well, second game, starts and tied at the end of regulation and goes into 6 overtimes. I mean, I remember the UConn fans are at 1:30 in the morning are saying, all right, do I stay to the end or do I go to Grand Central Station? Because the last train leaves at 1:45 to go back to Connecticut. So the party started a little bit late, as you can imagine, but we still had it, and went pretty late into the morning. The next day was a little bit rough.
I know we're running up against it a little bit here, so I'm gonna ask you this. So in your current role today, okay, talk a little bit about that and what that's like. And I was told to ask you, from a college football fan, why wasn't Florida State in the Final Four this past year?
All right. Well, my current role, you mentioned earlier.
Nothing specific. Yeah, right.
Yeah. No, you mentioned earlier, Danny Gavitt runs basketball postseason. I run college football postseason. The CFP is a little bit of a different entity, but they're part of bowl season, obviously. So I oversee the entire college football bowl system. There's 43 bowl games, believe it or not. It's a little bit unwieldy. I market and promote the system as a whole. Every executive director of every bowl game, they market and promote their own game, but I work for all of them collectively, and I'm their spokesperson. And we have a lot of promotional initiatives that go with that. In terms of Florida State, obviously if it was this year, the playoffs expanding to 12 teams and they'd be in as a champion. But last year, right or wrong, I know a lot of guys on the selection committee, it was 2 things. They felt that their strength of schedule just wasn't as good as some of the other teams. And they penalized them due to the fact that their great quarterback got injured the last regular season game. And even though they won that game and won the ACC championship, they said, well, this team without him isn't as good as with him. So if he was healthy, would they have got in? I don't know. I don't know if that's a fair evaluation. As a team, as a coach, as a group of 100 football players on a roster, you either win or you lose, right? And you want your accomplishments to. So I didn't love the decision. I think if you're one of the major conference champions, you should get in. But I will say what's interesting about it, they've been complaining about it for a year, and they think they're going to be better served in the SEC. I don't know how that gives them a better chance of getting the playoff with some losses built in on the schedule. So
I agree with that.
A little bit of focus, and they're not very good this year. So there's a lesson in there.
Yep, that's for sure. So let me ask you this too, when it comes to the bowl games, I've always been curious. How does it come up with the sponsors for the bowls? You have the Sugar Bowl and you have the Peach Bowl, but now it's the All-State whatever bowl, or how does that work with sponsorships? You take bids from the different sponsors, you recruit them, do they come to you? How does that work?
Yeah, so each bowl negotiates their own title sponsorship deal. I'm on the lookout for potential clients for them, and sometimes I assist. It's not an easy sell. There's always 5 or 6 bowl games that don't have a title sponsor, and the revenue from a title sponsorship really makes or breaks a bowl game in terms of profitability. But I think the title sponsor of bowl games is proving to be a great value. I don't know if you watched the Pop-Tarts Bowl last year, but I'm sure you heard about it. Yeah, and they had this edible mascot. 4.5 million people watched that game. I think a lot of them just to see what was this mascot going to do. And the amount of impressions. Sports Business Journal gave the Pop-Tarts Bowl and the Pop-Tarts brand an award for the best brand activation of the year because of the number of eyeballs that it generated. So it's proving to be a great value. It's kind of interesting. I think it's cool that bowl games are leaning into those title sponsorships. They take on a different tone. If a bowl game isn't part of the national championship equation, it might not seem as meaningful to a lot of people, but it's still really meaningful to the teams who participate, and for these title sponsors that can add a little bit of excitement.
Well, I know it's a big time job because football rules the roost as far as money coming into to the NCAA and everything. I mean, holy cow! I mean, it's phenomenal. What that does, and you see it. I was never a big college football guy per se, but my daughter was dating a guy that coached at Ole Miss and then at Rutgers. So we got into the SEC and and then when you started watching games, and you go, I'm watching games every Saturday now and Sunday. So it turned us all around. But
it's a fun sport. It's the second most popular
really
sport in the country, second to the NFL. So it drives the train. I just wish that the decisions made for college football weren't dragging all the other sports, including basketball, along in a way that doesn't benefit them. Yeah,
I agree. All right. Well, Nick, thanks so much. We're in a little bit of a time crunch. I appreciate you coming out and talking with us. Our guest today has been Nick Carparelli from the director of the bowl season and overlooks all the bowls, as we were just discussing, and his time in the Big East. Appreciate you coming out and sharing all those stories with us. Really gave us an insight as to what went on behind the scenes, especially during those times where there was transition in the league like that. So thanks again, man, for coming out.
Thank you. It was great chatting with you guys. I enjoyed it, and thanks for having me on. Like I said, I might be a little bit different type of guest for you, but nobody has more history.
No, it's all good. It's all good. We had fun talking to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hang out for a second. I'm going to wrap this up. Hang out for a second.
Great.
So you've been watching and listening to the Big East Rewind with Chuck Everson and Sonny Spera. The Big East Rewind was produced and directed by Nick Chico Corus and Daryl Gurney. Check us out on all things social media by putting Big East Rewind in the search bar and on our website at www.bigeastrewind.com. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share it with your friends. Thanks a lot for joining us. Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.